Okay, it is officially 6:30, so we wanted to get started promptly. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We're very excited to have a special guest with us this evening. This is our 5th year of Plainfield Parent Community Network. We are very excited to be back. We've taken some time off during the pandemic, but we thought that bringing this topic to light, especially during these times, was very important. So before I introduce Carolyn Orr, I want to let everybody know our presentation is online, the PowerPoint both in English and in Spanish. I also want to thank our sponsors, Plainfield Counseling Center, Seminar Marketing Pro, and Kwame Raoul's Illinois Attorney General's Office. Plainfield Parent Community Network is a volunteer network of parents, educators, and professionals committed to creating resources and opportunities for mental health support and education in the Plainfield community. Our mission is to provide lifelong learning in our ever-changing society, working in collaboration with school, home, and community. You can find us on the web at plainfieldpcn.org or on Facebook or Twitter. And if you have any questions, you can always email us at plainfieldpcn@gmail.com. This will be recorded and podcasted on our website for future viewing. And we will have a survey at the end. We use these surveys to be able to determine what needs our community has so that we can bring speakers to our community. So without further ado, your speaker tonight, Carolyn Orr, is an Internet Safety Specialist with the Illinois Attorney General's Office High Tech Crimes Bureau, ICAC Task Force. Her role involves public outreach, research, education, and prevention. She also teaches sociology and social psychology and criminology with a background in social and behavioral sciences. Her overall goal within these positions is to spread awareness, encourage positive leadership among youth, promote safety, and prevent further victimizations of innocent children and families. So again, without further ado, Carolyn, thank you for being with us this evening.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for that really nice introduction. And any of you that are joining tonight, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. I know that a lot of people are probably feeling a little zoomed out lately. There's been so many Zoom webinars and with e-learning and everything. So really, I extend my gratitude for you offering some of your time up for this tonight. And also a great thanks to the Parent Community Network and also to Tim Alvarez for getting this all set up. So tonight, before I get started on the actual presentation, I do want to let you know who ICAC is, because you might not be familiar with us, or maybe you have kind of heard of us, or maybe you're not sure. But ICAC is a part of the Attorney General's Office. Within the Attorney General's Office, we have the High Tech Crimes Bureau, and we have a task force program within that called the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. And basically our mission is to protect children from online crimes and online exploitation. And we have a lot of different people working on our team doing very, different roles and responsibilities, but coming together for the same mission. So we investigate and prosecute child exploitation cases. So for the state of Illinois, we usually help out all of the different jurisdictions, different counties, because sometimes, I guess you can say the police stations, they don't always have a lot of high-tech technology for these types of cases. So they'll reach out to our forensic staff, attorneys, and things like that for help with these cases. So we work hand in hand with affiliates that are all over the state. Also, ICAC is every state has their own, but it's federally funded, but each state runs and operates their own individually. We've got over 250 task force members. We've made over 1,700 arrests of sexual predators, and that's only as of November 2020. So that number is actually much higher because almost every week there's numerous search warrants on people that have been exploiting children, and there's numerous arrests. So that number is actually probably much more than 1,700 at this point right now. We just don't have all the data collected on there. But like I was saying, we train law enforcement. So we talk to, again, different police officers and people that do investigations, and we give them information on online apps, on what our, a lot of the cases are that are coming to us. And again, also high-tech technology. And we also provide internet safety training for students, for parents, for teachers, and people all across the state. So these here, let me just remove my slide over, there we go. These are the cases that we take on. So it could range from anything from cyberbullying to child pornography, sexting, sextortion, online enticement, child sex trafficking. And if you're wondering what CSAM is, where it says child pornography, we're really trying to kind of change the way that we interpret and the way that we verbalize that concept, because when we say child pornography, a lot of times there's this assumption that pornography involves consent. And that's not what these images and videos are that are out there that people are being arrested for. It's child abuse. It is sexual abuse that's happening to kids. And we want to make sure that we're calling it by its name, because calling it child pornography, like I said, sometimes people assume something about consent with pornography, that people are being paid to do it or something like that. And these are victims of sexual abuse. So we're referring to it as child sexual abuse material. And sometimes teens and even kids that are younger will produce material of themselves. Now, this sounds maybe a little bit uncomfortable to hear, but sometimes teens and kids will, be coerced by someone on the internet to create sexual imagery, and then they'll put it out there on the internet. So sometimes people say, well, how is that sexual abuse if they've made it themselves, or if they took the picture themselves and they sent it to someone or something like that? We would refer to that as child sexual exploitation material. So CSEM is what we would call that. But it's still a process that has happened because someone has coerced them, or someone has groomed them in a process to get them to send them inappropriate things like that. So there's a lot of different dynamics. And as I was saying, we have a lot of different people on our team. So we've got attorneys that go to court on behalf of the child when a crime has been committed against them. We have cybercrime specialists. My role is education, prevention, and public outreach. We've got investigators. We have a forensics team. And something kind of cool, we also have dogs. So I kind of like sharing this because I think it's really interesting. I love dogs, but these dogs that we have a really special skill. And if any of you have ever attended any of our webinars previously to this, you've probably seen me talk about these dogs before, but they're really great. They can pick up the scent of electronics. So they can smell the scent of flash drives, hard drives, computers, laptops, tablets, cell phones, anything electronic technology, they can smell that. And I also tell the kids about these dogs, and sometimes they're like, well, those things don't even have a smell, but they can, being dogs, they can pick up on little things that humans can't pick up on. And sometimes people think that's strange. Why would we need these dogs? But what they can do is they can help us when there's a search warrant, when evidence is really hard to find. So I'll give you one actual case example. There was a man who had been creating videos of himself abusing kids. It was sexual abuse, and it was on the internet, and it got reported. And when the investigators went to go do the search warrant and to go and seize the evidence and all of this man's devices and make the arrest, they couldn't find the evidence anywhere. They checked all of his, computers and laptops and anything that he had. They could not find these videos that they needed for proof of the evidence, because they were able to trace those videos to an IP address, and they were able to find out where this person lived, but they couldn't find the actual evidence. They needed the copy of those videos that were found online. So they searched all over, couldn't find them. They brought in this dog. His name is Browser. We actually have a few of these dogs, but this is one of them, Browser, Sweetie Pie. And so he goes into the house, sniffs around everything, smells the floor, smells the walls, smells the couches. And he walked over to one of the walls and just pointed his nose straight up. And the only thing up on the wall was a clock. So the officer took the clock down, opened it up, and on the inside of that clock, there was a little flash drive that had all of those sexually abusive, exploitative videos on there. So thanks to these dogs, they're really great, because they really do help us fight crime, and they help us to protect innocent children. And luckily, with the finding of that evidence, they were able to prosecute that man for the material that he was creating, and make sure that those victims were never hurt again. So we also work hand in hand with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So you might have heard of the National Center before. They're a little bit more popular. You may be seeing them or heard them mentioned in the news or on TV. You might have heard of John Walsh before. He's the founder of the company, but they're the ones that are always out there helping to find missing children. So we work with them, and what happens is they run the National Clearinghouse for cyber tips. So if you ever come across anything online that looks like something is just not right, like a child is being exploited in some way, abused in some way, or any kind of sexual content of a minor, you can make a report at the cybertipline.com or cybertipline.org. When you go onto that site and you make a report on there, it gets sent to their analysts. They look it over and they try to do some tracing if they can trace the content. And then if it happens to be a case that would be in Illinois, then it comes to us, and then we take it from there. So this is a good resource to have if you've never heard of this before. I usually tell kids, tell your parents about the cyber tip line, because you never know when you might come across some material on the internet where a child is in harm's way. And if you don't know what to do about it, of course, you can always go to your local police and talk to them. But another way to do that would be just go straight to the cyber tip line, and it's going to go straight to law enforcement from there. Okay, so some of the objectives tonight that we're going to talk about. We're going to kind of explore the concept of socialization, social skills, and kind of helping kids to manage emotions and impulsivity, and how that will translate into not only behavior in everyday life, but also their online behaviors, and helping them to navigate any kind of incidents that might come their way when they're online that they might not know how to deal with. So for this particular webinar, we won't be talking a lot about the dangers and the risks and some of the things that you might be expecting when you hear digital safety. You might be wanting to know, what are the apps where it's happening, or what are the things that people are doing. Those things will come up in the other webinars that we go through along the way, but this one is a little bit more focused on sociological aspects and psychology of children, and some of the studies that we found and what can kind of help them to manage their online navigation and their online use. So first, I just want to talk a little bit about the process of socialization. So usually when we hear the word socialize, I think we kind of tend to think we're just going to go, see our friends or see our family and hang out, have a nice time, and we're going to go socialize. That is socialization, but it's a bit more than that. Socialization runs a bit deeper. It's something that starts at the moment that we're born. We start to, learn things about our surroundings. We start to observe things about our surroundings, and we pick up on concepts of what our society and our culture would deem as normal. So that's how we kind of learn how to function as a member of our society. So just as some examples that I think are kind of fun, there are some, norms are going to change across different cultures throughout different time periods. So for example, and maybe some of you might be Turkish, but if you go to Turkey and somebody has their hand in their pocket, it's considered to be kind of a sign of arrogance. So if someone's walking around with their hand in their pocket, they look like someone might consider them to be an arrogant person. To us, that might seem, or here, I guess you could say, that might seem a little strange, because we don't usually think, oh, that person's a jerk when you see someone holding or putting their hand in their pocket, right? So it's not, I'm not saying that it's bad or it's wrong, it's just different. Same thing where if you go to some countries, France, Italy, if you ask for condiments in a restaurant, so maybe if some of you have traveled before, this might be familiar to you, but if you ask for salt and pepper or spices in a restaurant, that's not a common thing. Here, it's no big deal. Can I get the salt? Can you bring me ketchup? Something like that. But in some places, that's considered to be impolite, and it's an insult to the cook who has prepared your meal. In some places, if you go to a friend's house, you're supposed to, and you have dinner there, you're supposed to leave a little bit of food left on the plate to signify to the person who prepared the meal for you that you're full and you've had plenty. And if you eat everything, it kind of signifies that you didn't have enough and they didn't give you enough. So it's polite to leave a little bit on the plate, and then give it to them. So things are a little different in every place that you go. I was in India 8 or 9 years ago, and I had to learn really fast that the cultural norms change and they're very different. So if anybody is of Indian descent, you might be familiar with the concept of, saying okay to someone. Is here, we would nod our heads up and down, but the head nod in India is side to side. So kind of interesting stuff to learn. I think social norms are really interesting, and customs are so neat to learn about. But really what they reveal to us is that there's no true and universal concept of what is normal. We define normal as we go through things in society, as we catch on to things and everyone starts to repeat them, or if we don't catch on to things and they are not repeated. So it doesn't always seem like it, but we actually have some power in creating the social norms of society. So knowing that, I would like to kind of apply that to thinking about safety. We can make safety a norm, and we can actually have some role in shaping the outcome and the results of children being safe online if we are talking to them about safety as often as possible. If we're setting rules in the family about their online use, what types of apps can they use? How old do they have to be? What types of games are they allowed to play? And, do we follow the ratings, the age ratings for games? Are we checking their phones every once in a while, asking them questions about who they're communicating with? All of those things should be a normal part of our conversation and our dialogue with kids, because then it becomes normal to them to do safe things and to use the internet safely. If we wait until something bad has happened to them, then it's not likely that, they might actually be more likely to have another incident where something bad happens to them online. Because sometimes we think, oh, everything's fine, I can see them, they're in my house under my roof, so I have an idea of what's going on, but we don't really always know what's going on, who they're talking to, what kind of conversations that person is having with them, what they might be asking for of your child. So talking about privacy settings, good behaviors, even teaching them how to make reports, even letting them know about the cyber tip line, things like that, we can make that the norm. And the more we make safety the norm, the more that we're going to reduce the chances of a crime happening to kids, and less kids will be exploited. So something that I would really like to emphasize is trying as much as possible to get kids to go outside and play, to play with friends. And I know that it's really hard, especially over this past year that, we've been living with this pandemic. So it's a little bit of a different society right now. But when possible, try to encourage them as often as you can, to have them talk to people in person, not just texting each other, to play with their friends in person. Because as we socialize, we start to pick up on things when we're in person with another. So we pick up on body language, we pick up on, tone of voice. We can understand each other's emotions a little bit better when we're in person, because we can see their reactions. And as we do this from childhood, across our entire life course, we get better with our understanding of others and ourselves. So when we have that good, we start to learn good communication skills, which are helpful for relationships, helpful for friendships, helpful for any kind of interactions in jobs, things like that. We become more self-aware and more aware of others. And that can even foster empathy. And you might be thinking, well, how does this relate to computers and online stuff? The more empathy that kids are, the more that we can encourage them to be more empathetic, and the more they can understand or try to put themselves in someone else's shoes, the less likely that they're going to harass other kids or get involved in cyberbullying. Almost every school that I go to has an issue with cyberbullying. Sometimes it's a big issue, sometimes it's a small issue that was resolved pretty quickly, but just trying to give them those skills. And a lot of studies are starting to show that, even though, of course, no one is online all day long, kids are talking to their family members that they live with, of course, and talking to their friends, but they're doing that less and less and less as the years go on, because of technology and the way technology is moving. So the amount of time that is accumulated in their lifetime of interpersonal interactions is a lot less than what we had, when we were young. It's a lot less than what we've had across our lives. So kids today, they're getting less hours of that kind of interpersonal interaction. And a lot of them are developing anxieties, or they have odd social skills because they haven't really picked up on social cues. And it causes problems for them in school. It causes problems for them at home, in relationships, and the list goes on. So it's good to try to encourage them. And I'm not saying the internet's bad, but trying to get them to do some activities that are offline, like sports or any kind of extracurricular clubs, getting together with their friends, maybe have a crafting day or something like that. So there's kind of a different reality that kids have experienced, and adults too, but over the past maybe 20 years or so, especially with social media, there's kind of this sense for young kids of overlapping realities. So they have this concept of, this is who I am, and this is my online persona. And sometimes those two personas don't always line up. Maybe someone who, they seem one way, but then when you look at their social media pages, it's almost like they're an entirely different person. They might say things or post things that you wouldn't expect out of them. So teenagers, they have, especially teens, but even the younger kids, they have so many different online accounts that sometimes they get a little bit of stress because they feel like they're managing multiple online personas. And they feel kind of this duality or even a multiplicity of identities. And they have to kind of balance those. Who am I to everyone on Instagram? Who am I to everyone on Snapchat? And they oftentimes feel anonymous, even though they know that the audience is huge and so many people are reading their posts and looking at their pictures. When there's a lot of people in a crowd, or you perceive that there's a lot of people paying attention to you, you sometimes feel anonymous, and you might say or do things that you wouldn't normally do in person with others. So that's why oftentimes kids get caught up in cyberbullying or sometimes even sending revealing photos to boyfriends or girlfriends or something like that, or posting them on a website. And maybe that's not something that they would normally do, but they really feel this sense of just being anonymous. And that's kind of similar to riot behavior. When you get a huge group of people and there's so many in a crowd, what happens is individuals start to feel like no one can single them out. They feel like, you lose a little bit of a sense of your identity. And that's why sometimes people do crazy things in a riot situation that they would never normally do, because they don't feel there's a detachment from their own identity. And that can happen online sometimes. And that's why you see a lot of kids kind of getting caught up in a lot of different behaviors that they wouldn't normally do, whether it be their posts, how they behave in games, how they talk to other kids, or how they even talk to adults. And there's also the concept of FOMO. So you might have heard of that, fear of missing out. It sounds a little bit silly, but it's a pretty real thing. Kids report, we do a lot of surveys and we read a lot of studies, but kids report that because of the fact that they can see what their other friends are doing so often, something, I didn't have that when I was a kid. I don't even think I had a cell phone until I was maybe 22. But kids today can see when their friends are hanging out and when their friends are doing things. And I always try to make sure that they know you're not going to be able to hang out with all of your friends every day. But they feel upset if they were excluded. And that could really create some stress for them and some anxiety, or just feelings of, not being a part of others. And another aspect of that is they feel that they constantly have to keep up with information as it's changing, because it's changing so fast, or their friends are posting things so often. So notifications are constantly popping up. So maybe their phones are off during the school day, and then at the end of the school day, they have to make sure that they caught up with, all of the people that they follow on Instagram, or all of the people that they're friends with on Snapchat or something like that. So they feel this constant tension where I have to check all the notifications. I have to go through everything. I have to make sure I'm up to date. And that's something that the older generations didn't really have. Of course, there's, different types of anxiety across all of the generations, but it's kind of a newer form of anxiety among young people, because they feel like they have to, stay right on top of everything that their friends are doing, and all of their online friends, people that they would consider friends, but online followers and things like that. So as much as possible, we really like to encourage kids to be a good digital citizen. And they've probably heard this word in school before. They've probably, talked about it in their classes with, online safety education, things like that. But just really encouraging them to use the internet in a safe way, in a responsible way, being respectful to others, and also talking to them about their digital footprint. So you've probably heard digital footprint before, but it's kind of like in a way, I like to describe it as a story. We kind of are putting a story out there about ourselves when we're on social media. People are seeing bits and pieces of our life, whether it be the words that we say, the pictures that we post, the videos that we post. So I try to encourage them as much as possible to tell a good story and to think about their future too. There have been, and this was just not last year, but I believe 2019, one of the Cook County ICAC members was telling me that they knew, she's an attorney, they knew of 9 boys that all lost scholarships just because of things that they put online. And when the colleges discovered these things, they retracted the scholarships. So we also have to think about opportunities that might be taken away from kids, and adults too, of course. But, we really want to be mindful that people are looking to find out information about us on the internet, and that's the way things go. And, not everybody agrees that that should be okay, but people will make decisions if they want us on a team, or if they want us in their college, or if they want us in their place of employment based on what we post. So especially for those kids that are in high school going on to college, or kids that maybe are in junior high going into high school and they want to make a specific team, if they're posting things that their coach might see, they might not make that team, because if they're posting, let's say, maybe, for example, hateful things or just disrespectful things, that coach might see that and, looking them up to see what kind of person they are when they make a decision about who can be on that team. And they might say, well, this doesn't seem like a team player. This doesn't seem like someone that's going to get along with everybody and treat everybody equally with fairness. And, we don't need someone that can't do that, because that's what a team is all about. So it would make sense that they wouldn't want to choose someone who's posting things that are hateful or inappropriate or disrespectful. There was a case like that with some girls and here in Illinois. I mean, there's been a few, but there was one where these girls made a video of themselves talking very disrespectfully about their classmates. They were using racial slurs, and this video went viral, and one of the girls got fired from her part-time job that she had, and one girl lost her spot on a team that she was trying out for. I think she was in her senior year. But, and I think it's good to encourage kids to be kind and respectful regardless, not just because they might lose out on an opportunity, but it's important that kids know that, sometimes they get angry and sometimes they get frustrated and they just post something online and they think it's no big deal. But sometimes those things can really follow them throughout their lives and could have negative consequences. So a lot of parents will ask the question of when is the perfect time for me to allow my child to have their own cell phone, or when is the perfect time for me to allow my child to get on social media? There really isn't a golden age. It really depends on your child specifically, because every child is going to be a little bit different in their cognitive development and their emotional skills, self-awareness, and how well they deal with problems, how well they resolve conflicts and things like that. I mean, no child is perfect at any of those things. Even adults are still working on those types of things, right? No, none of us are perfect. But when we want to make a decision, if my child can have their own cell phone right now, or if they can have their own access to social media, you want to think about how well they do with navigating a problem when it comes their way. Because sometimes, 11, 12, 13-year-olds, they get their first phone, and I know kids get them even younger than that. But parents might say, okay, you're 12, you can go ahead and get on Instagram if you want to, just be careful. And then they get on Instagram and all these people are sending them feedback about their pictures, about their posts. And that's a new thing for a lot of kids when they just get on social media. They don't really fully conceive of how many people are going to be commenting on what they have to say or commenting on their looks. And sometimes, saying things that are going to send them into a downward spiral and maybe become depressed or anxious about social media because they don't know how to handle that. Or they might be the target of cyberbullying, or they might participate in cyberbullying others. So we really want to think about, your child specifically and looking at their social, emotional, aspects to them. And these are some of the things here on the slide, looking at how well do they manage emotions? Do they have a good ability to recognize the emotions of others? Do they typically make good, responsible decisions? What are their choices like? When you start thinking about these types of things, that will help you to determine whether it's a good time for them to enter in the world of social media or even online gaming. Okay, so managing emotions. Emotion management can be difficult for some people, especially, kids are still learning how to manage their emotions. They're still learning what is appropriate or what we would consider to be an appropriate response to different situations. So helping kids to regulate their emotions is so important, not just in their everyday life, but also in their safety. Because what happens is if they're good at managing their emotions, if they come to a situation online that could be dangerous or harmful, they might not make an impulsive decision. They might make a good decision that will help them to get through the situation a little bit smoother. Or they might be fully aware that they need to come to you as the parent and talk to you, or go talk to their school counselor, whoever it is that they have as a trusted adult. And some of the things that you can do with kids, and this is, I would say a little bit better with the younger kids to kind of get them started early. But some different things that you can do to help them manage their emotions is even something so simple like the game I Spy. If you're in the car and you're playing I Spy with them, what's happening is they're starting to develop really good observational skills. So they're looking at their surroundings, they're taking in all the information, they're thinking about what they see, because you're just asking them when you play I Spy, to spot something, but they're taking in all of the information around them and they're thinking about it before they give you a response. And the more that you play those types of games with them, the more they get used to, instead of having kind of a knee-jerk reaction to something, they get used to being a good observer. They get used to, let me get all of this information before I respond in a specific way. And that those things will process mentally. Also teaching them to put a label to their feelings. Some kids struggle with that. So sometimes we really have to help them in saying, let's give a name to that feeling that you're experiencing right now. And the more that, I know some parents and some people are like, oh, we always have to talk about feelings, or they think that there's something, wrong or weak about that. But talking about feelings with kids is going to get them more in touch with, how they feel about certain situations. And it's going to teach them to start understanding what is the best way to react in this moment instead of just having a meltdown. So even trying to teach them to have a response that isn't an impulsive response, not right away, but saying, let's wait a minute, how else can we react to this? So a good thing that you can do with them is give them scenarios, give them hypotheticals. Say, if you were in this situation, and it can be kind of a fun game. If you're in this situation, what would you do? And let them think through that. Let them come up with ideas. That helps them to think about what are situations, what are consequences, and what are solutions. And when they start thinking in that way more often, they'll be able to think in that way when they are in a situation where they really do need to, not in a hypothetical scenario. So also teaching them to be flexible, to have good self-reflection, to think about themselves, think about others. That kind of relates back to that empathy piece that was mentioned before. So a lot of kids can be very impulsive. Adults can be impulsive too. So trying to, and this is very similar to the emotion management, but teaching them to take turns and share as often as possible will help them to kind of lower those impulses, teaching them to let other people speak at certain moments, now it's their turn. And this might seem kind of like, common sense type stuff, but even giving them problem solving puzzles, that gives them an opportunity to kind of sit down and think through a process, think through the steps of something, instead of, again, just responding to something, or I want this, or I need this, or having a meltdown or getting upset. When you give them problem solving puzzles, it starts to train their brain to think through, what is the scenario? What are the consequences? What are my options? Now, what is the solution? So when they can do that better in their everyday life, they can also do that better online, because there's probably going to be some point where, they come across a situation, they know maybe it's not right, or they're talking to someone online and they start to realize maybe this person really isn't a 12-year-old. This person sounds a little older. I mean, we see that kind of stuff every day on our end. So instead of just listening to that person or impulsively doing what that person tells them what to do, for example, we've had some people that have asked kids, go in your mom's purse and get me their credit card. Tell me the numbers that are on those cards. Or I want you to take a picture of yourself in this very revealing way. And if you don't do it, and then they give them some kind of, they convince them to do it. And then if they do, and many kids, strangely, I think we all kind of have this idea that kids would go, ew, that's gross, I'm not going to do that. But so often kids just believe what that other person is saying. And they imagine that there's trust, and they imagine that the person speaking to them on the other end is a good person. And they do what that person says. And then sometimes those people will blackmail the child and say, if you don't send me more pictures like this, I'm going to, and then they'll say, I'm going to put this picture all over the internet. And now your parents are going to see, or now your teachers are going to see. So send me more. And sometimes kids get wrapped up in these bad situations. And if this relates back to the impulse control, because a lot of kids that are very impulsive, they have a higher likelihood of getting wrapped up in those situations, because sometimes they aren't thinking through the consequences and they're just doing it immediately because maybe they're being offered something too. Some of these online predators will offer children gifts. They'll say, I'm going to send you a present if you send me what I want. Or if you send me an explicit photo, I'm going to send you a code to play a game online that you really like, or I'm going to send you, the money in a game like Robux and Roblox or something like that. And sometimes kids are more interested in what they're going to get out of it, and they're not thinking about the consequences of what could happen if they provide this person with this kind of image or material or whatever it is that they're asking of them. So it's good to do as many things as you can to try to help curb their impulses so they don't have those types of reactions that are quick and they're thinking about consequences, and then they can have better solutions and make better choices when they're online. Okay, so setting time limits. We want to make sure that, we're paying a lot of attention to how kids are using the internet. And I know sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming for parents because there's so many apps, there's so many games, kids are all over the internet, and they're kind of like, they're geniuses when it comes to navigating technology because they've grown up with it. So they know how to access all kinds of stuff. They know how to, use things. They know how to kind of get in and out of websites, and, they know all of the functions of the apps. So it's good to, it could actually be a really good learning opportunity or a good bonding opportunity even to sit down with your kid and say, hey, why do you like Snapchat so much? Instead of just kind of saying, be careful on that Snapchat, or I don't want you using that, or, instead of making it this bad thing, you can kind of probe a little bit, ask them, why do you like Snapchat so much? Who do you talk to on Snapchat? Oh, okay. How do you use it? And sometimes kids really respond well to that because they feel like, oh, I've got something that mom and dad don't know that much about that I can teach them about. And they get excited to talk about technology. So you can kind of use that as a way to bond with them, to talk to them, even asking once in a while, hey, how do you play this game that you've been playing every day? Can you show me? Because then you get an idea of what they're doing, who they're communicating with. And it could be a nice little moment too, to kind of bond and learn something with each other. So also checking the age requirements of social media. Know that most of the social media apps like Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, TikTok, all of those have an age requirement of at least 12. Some of them are 13. So letting children, I know there's a lot of kids on there that are even younger, but letting the really young kids on there, you have to know that most of the people that they're going to come in contact with are going to be older people, and sometimes even young teens. And this doesn't happen very often. The data doesn't show that kids are that interested in dating sites, but I have talked to some young teens that said they made a profile on a dating site that was for somebody or for people that are 18 and over. So now you've got this 13-year-old who's having conversations regularly with people that are 18 and up, which of course can never, it's not going to be a good thing, or it's not going to lead to anything positive. So we want to make sure that we're checking on the age requirements of the apps they use, the ratings of the games that they're playing, asking them about their friends, who's on their friends lists, making sure that they're only keeping friends that they know and trust, not just random people from out there on the internet, and even limiting their screen time. There's been some studies that have been done showing that excessive media is connected to obesity, lack of sleep, even sleep issues, and having problems in school, being aggressive, and a variety of other behaviors. So I usually tell kids, not all families will have this rule, but it's good to have them turn off their technology about an hour before bed. Because usually when we're on a cell phone or we're using some kind of technology, we're not always, we're doing multiple things. We might be texting someone, and then we're emailing someone, and then we're jumping over to a game real quick, then checking our texts again. So we're kind of training our brains to not stay on one focal path, and we're training our brains to bounce all over the place. So, and I'm not trying to make a claim that this is, a cause of attention deficit disorder or anything like that, but we're training our brains to kind of bounce all over and losing some of that focus. And when kids are online late at night, it's keeping them up because they're wired. I mean, it keeps, even the light from the screen, there's been some studies on how having that light shining in your face is also kind of keeping our brains wide open or turned on. So having them shut those devices down about an hour before bed is going to help them get that time that they need to wind down, to kind of shut their brain down, and to actually get a better night's sleep. And when they have a better night's sleep, they're going to feel better the next day. They're going to be better at absorbing all of that information that they're getting in school, that the teachers are teaching them, instead of being sleepy and cranky and maybe getting in trouble at school or not really learning, what they should be learning. So it's very helpful to have them shut those things down. And I would also suggest not allowing them to take their phones or tablets into their bedroom at night after you go to bed. I've had so many kids say, oh, my parents don't know, but I'm online late at night and I'm talking to people on social media after they go to sleep. So it might be a good idea to take the phones away from them. And I'm not trying to make it sound like everyone's children are doing all these bad things, but oftentimes a lot of the people that are on social media late at night are older adults. So if they're out there looking to talk to people, they might have a higher likelihood of having an encounter with an older person that might not be up to anything good if they know they're talking to a young child. And oftentimes predators that are looking to talk to kids and exploit children in some way or take advantage of them, that's when they're looking to talk to kids, because they know mom and dad are probably asleep, not paying attention. And that's when they can, convince kids of all kinds of things, or, start a process of grooming that many of them will do with kids. So I just like to encourage parents and children to have kind of this concept or perception of social responsibility. Sometimes we have this idea that other people's problems are not our problems, but if we try to take on the role of having social responsibility, then we're going to have smoother interactions with people all across the board. So I try to tell kids as much as possible, be accountable for your actions. If you cyberbullied someone in the past, it's okay to go back and say, I'm really sorry for that. I've grown now, I'm more mature now. And I've had kids tell me that they've done that and then they got their friend back or something like that. Also, asking permission for posting pictures. I've had kids, mostly junior high kids, that will come up to me after a presentation and say, how do I ask my parents not to post so many pictures of me? Because they're posting pictures of me all the time. And some kids actually don't like that. Some of them don't have a lot of pictures on their social media, but then their parents are posting a lot about them. So of course, as the parent, you probably don't want your child saying that you can or can't do something, but sometimes that does bother kids, especially after they learn of some of the dangers and risks. Sometimes they think, oh, my parents are posting so many pictures of me, I hope their accounts are actually private. So allowing them to have that, to talk to them about that and asking them, do you mind if I post the pictures from your birthday party? Or do you mind if I post the pictures from your game last week or something like that? That teaches them that they have a little bit of a say in that. It teaches them that you're concerned about their safety. And it also teaches them to ask others if it's okay to post pictures of other people. And that gives them this understanding that consent for these types of things is very important. And just, some of the other things like choosing their words wisely, making sure that they're posting things that are responsible, being an upstander rather than a bystander. So a bystander is someone that sees something happening and doesn't do anything about it. An upstander will try to help with the situation. So when it comes to something like cyberbullying, I usually will encourage kids to, because sometimes they'll say, well, I'm going to say something to that, to the bully because they've been bullying my friend on this one game for a long time. But then when they say something and jump in, even some of the videos that I've seen for kids will say something to the bully. But then what happens is now you have another child being bullied. So you have a bigger problem. So I usually suggest to them, if you are being bullied, talk to a trusted adult. And if there is any threats of violence or threats of harm, that's actually a crime. So that's when you can take it to your local police and talk to them about it. But if you see someone being bullied, tell your kids to not stand up to the bully and not get involved with the person that's bullying, but send a message to the person who is being victimized in that moment. Send them a message and say, I saw that this person is treating you unfairly, being disrespectful. I'll be there for you if you need a friend to listen. And that can actually go a long way and help the situation. It's not going to always end the bullying that's happening, but when that other child knows that someone is there to support them, that can make a huge difference. So just encouraging that can be pretty important. This kind of rolls into everything that I've been talking about, but just really trying to encourage kids to, take on kind of an attitude of kindness and, caring for others. I think that's so helpful, not just in an online situation and being responsible in how they post, staying out of cyberbullying situations and things like that, but also the, fostering compassion, understanding. Those things are going to be helpful in so many ways because, just thinking about a lot of things that have gone on over this past year, if we have a little bit more compassion and understanding, people will have smoother interactions. People will feel a sense of connectedness instead of a detachment from others. And as kids, their friendships will be strengthened. Their interactions are going to be a lot smoother. Something kind of interesting is I've had a lot of kids tell me, well, we always hear about cyberbullying and we know we're not supposed to do it. And I've had a couple kids say, well, my mom's always getting into fights with people online, or my dad's always, saying crazy things to people on the internet. If we're setting that example, they're going to do the same thing. They're going to think that that's okay. And even though sometimes, of course, the rules are different for adults and kids, but if they see that, you're leading by example, and they will have a higher likelihood to think it's okay to treat others in a negative way, to, say whatever they want on the internet, or to, if they're feeling anonymous, they might say all kinds of things and they could face negative consequences because of that. So encouraging kids to set a good example for others. And like I said already, holding themselves accountable and teaching their friends to do the same, being an upstander, all of these things roll into being a good leader and having good leadership skills, because it teaches them to, get along with others and work well with others. And those are things that are needed in every aspect of life, whether it be family, jobs. Having some good leadership skills is going to help them to also not have as high of a likelihood to be victimized by someone else, because they will have that kind of sense of, I can handle this situation. I'm going to talk to my parents about this. I'm not going to talk to this person online who is bothering me, things like that. So this is the end, and it's about 7:15. So for the last 15 minutes, if anybody has any questions, I will be happy to take your questions. Are we using the chat box or are we using the Q&A?
We can use either. Either option should work for people.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, so there's no questions in the Q&A. And let me check the chat, see if there's anything in there.
There's nothing in there right now.
All right. So like I said, this presentation specifically revolves a little bit more, we talked about social skills, emotion management, impulsivity, just some of the different, I guess you could say, personality traits, but also just social abilities. This focuses more on that. As we move along through the webinars, and there's also other webinars that we're doing too for the public, but as we go through those, we will also learn about things like enticement of children, the issue of sexting and how that's kind of growing among teens. We'll talk about things like YouTube Kids and some of the dangers for very young kids out there, or risks and things like that. But I'm not seeing any questions. So, all right, well, I just want to thank all of you so much for joining tonight. It's been a nice time. Oh, I do see one question. All right, let's see. Can there be filters added to the kids' school computers? Yes, so any kind of school issued tablets or school issued technology, usually with the schools, the IT staff will handle that. They'll put filters on websites or any kind of programs that they use. And that really does vary by school. So I can't speak for your school district specifically. I don't know, what they do with that, but there have been some issues with, I had one school where they were using Chromebooks, and these were kids that were in 6th grade, and they actually, none of them are on social media, because I don't think any of them were allowed to be on social media yet, and I don't think they had their own phones. But what they were doing is they were sharing a Google document, passing that back and forth, because multiple people can add to a Google Doc on their Chromebook, and they created a slideshow of like 200 slides, and there were things on, and these are 6th graders, but there were pictures and words on there about things like beating women, hurting children, and just some really crazy stuff. Some really unfortunate and disturbing things that they were putting on there that they were sharing. So the school had actually asked me to come and talk to those specific group of kids that was doing that. So that might be something just to note for schools to take a look at. But schools are usually really good about, and I'm guessing your school district is probably great about this, just looking into how the kids are using their Chromebooks and making sure that they're putting filters up on those websites and blockers.
Yeah, and I can speak to that just a little bit. I do know we do have filters for all of our students. So we're new to one-to-one as of this past year. And all of our computers do have filters. We have found situations where kids can get around those filters. And if that does happen, feel free to reach out to your building administration, and they can get our technology department to investigate that.
All right, sounds good.
So again, I want to thank Carolyn. Thank you so much for joining us, not only tonight, but the next 3 Thursdays. Our next event is on May 13th, Building Online Resilience. This webinar shares ideas to build online resilience in children, to facilitate tools to positively bounce back from negative experiences that were referenced here tonight, as well as navigate the internet with a critical eye. I'd also like to thank my PPCN counterparts, Jenny Hamby, parent and founder of Seminar Marketing Pro, Kai Freeman, parent and principal of Dryden Point Middle School, Mary Ellen Miller, parent and clinical director of the Therapeutic Academic Program, Brian Sorg, parent and principal of Meadowview Elementary School, Christine Belcastro, parent and counselor at Plainfield East High School, and Corey Warden, parent and licensed clinical professional counselor at Plainfield Counseling Center. Anybody looking for CEUs or CPDUs, please email myself at tlborders@psd202.org. And you will find this presentation with the PowerPoint and the podcast on our website at plainfieldpcn.net. So thank you again, everybody, for your attendance this evening, and we hope to see you next Thursday.
Okay, see you then. Bye-bye.
Thank you.